Morning, everybody, and welcome to this new appointment with 1 Hour with Europe, the almost monthly appointment organized by Ente New Brussels office with Commission people. Today, we have the pleasure to have with us Giulia Del Brenna, which is Deputy Director of Strategic and Economic Analysis Directorate and also Head of Strategic and Regulation, Single Market and Industrial Policy Unit in DigiGrow. You have plenty of roles, Giulia. Congratulations. So today we are going to talk about one of the communications that have been published in March this year. Is related to the single market, if you want, at 30, but also the long-term competitiveness of the EU beyond the 2030. So it will be interesting to somehow elaborate and reason about what are the vision and the perspectives that possibly Europe can have beyond the 2030s, that we know is a sort of initial checkup points towards the achievement of the Green Deal and the full decarbonization of Europe through the set of policies and initiatives that Europe is implementing on a daily basis, I would like to say, because the Commission is extremely productive in making legislation and communications. A few instructions for use for the newcomers to 1 Hour with Europe. Giulia will present for 30, 25, 30, 35 minutes, depending, of course, on the content of her presentation. And then we will open the floor for question and answer from you as participants. So one little recommendation: do not write the questions. We are not going to read your questions, but please reserve your right to intervene by just putting your name in the Q&A area of the Zoom channels that we're using to broadcast this transmission. So Q&A area, click on it, state your name, and I will make sure that you will intervene. To intervene, you will have to open your camera and your microphone, meaning that we are going to authorize you to intervene directly. Given that, Giulia, welcome. Thank you very much for being with us today. And we are very curious to hear what you're going to tell us, and especially myself.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Massimo, for hosting me here and for the kind introduction. Yes, I do a lot of things, but with basically one hat, a fancy hat. So it's my first time in such a format, so bear with me if I do strange things. If I raise my hand, it's just to change the slide. Please don't change the slide, so that you know it's not. I will raise my hands as an Italian, but awkward raise my hand is just the change of slides. And yes, we can. So on the 16th of March of this year, there was quite a packed agenda in the Commission, and a number of important documents, at least important for me, but I guess for more than me, have been adopted. Some you don't see in the slide, but I know you had here my colleague Stefano Soro presenting the Net Zero Industry Act that was adopted on that day. Also the Critical Raw Materials Act, and two communications that you see in the screen: the communication on the single market at 30 and the communication on long-term competitiveness. Why this huge amount of papers? Because we had quite a hectic beginning of the year. The anniversary of the single market had been due already for 30 years, so basically we knew. But because of the Inflation Reduction Act of the Americans, the Swedish presidency asked for a number of things to be put forward, and in particular, a short-term response. That's why on 1st of February, there was a communication on response to the green challenges and also inflation. Sorry, I never get the inflation because it's not really related in my mind, but it's called Inflation Reduction Act. And this is why, in a way, the anniversary communication was a bit pushed back, and then was twinned with the communication on long-term competitiveness, because an anniversary is an occasion for celebrate, and we will go there, the great achievements of the single market, but it's also an occasion to see where do we go from there. And also to remind us all but one, the single market is not complete and will never be complete. And the single market is not a nice flower pot to put in the living room, is really the biggest asset we have for long-term competitiveness. In the slide, you can see with under the arrows, these documents, which are not communications, which are one is a staff working document, and the other one, sorry, an online tool. And these follow the normal calendar and were published at the end of January. At the end of this presentation, I will explain why January is important. Conclusions on these two communications from the European Council will come next week. I cannot anticipate much, but basically, obviously, single market is dear to us all, including the heads of state and government, and they will be also having a conclusion on what we should do with long-term competitiveness. Next, please. So, first, the celebration. 30 years of the EU single market. We had a number of questions. Yeah, no, but the single market started with the treaty. Well, as a matter of words, it was the internal market. But let's say the treaty already from the start put down the principle of the 4 freedoms of movement for persons, services, goods, and capital. But then it was Jacques Delors who decided with the Act unique that more had to be done, and this had to be done in quite a regulatory way, and launched a wave of regulations and mostly directives. And this is what is called then the single market, but now is arriving at 30 years. So this map shows also the incredible expansion to the whole continent, not the whole continent, but a big part of it, of the single market. And one could even include, because of EFTA agreements, Norway, and I know there are a lot of Norwegians.
I was going to ask you this question, I have to say, where is the blue dot in Norway?
Yeah, there should be, but this map is of member states. But good point, we should have also a map showing those that are actually in the single market also because of particular agreements. So you have a dot that is only yellow, and we hear, or we heard, oh, today is an anniversary, by the way. Today is an anniversary of Brexit referendum. Okay. I think 6 years, something like that, but still the expansion is quite amazing. So we can go to the next. And today the EU single market is at least 446 million citizens, because we should also add the citizens of the European Economic Area, at least 23 million businesses, 15% of the world economy, and 31% of world trade, which goes to show that, yes, the EU single market is one of the 3 biggest single markets, meaning the 3rd after the US and China, but in terms of world trade is really the biggest. Then we have some figures of employed persons that have another EU citizenship, and tertiary level students that coming from another EU country. These numbers look smaller, but have been in steady increase. And I guess given the demography of the people that are following, you know how this is so enriching to have students coming from other universities, and not only in exchange programs, but more and more students deciding to study elsewhere, which is something that is a great development, and also important for future generations to have this as more, let's say, as mindset up, more than something that, oh, I decided to apply. So if we can go to the next, and here we come to the fact that, things are going well, things are getting better, but still there are some gaps to bridge. Here you see the trade in goods and services in the single market. It has doubled since 93, so since 30 years ago, but with a huge difference between goods and services. And here we see there is quite a potential for services, even though not all services can be traded. For example, the hairdresser, which is like the classical example, usually you will not go and cross a border for the hairdresser, except if you are in a border community, but still, it is true that many obstacles remain for the integration of services. Also, you may observe at the right-hand side of the graph, obviously you have this disruption, which is COVID, but you see that the trade in goods rebounded after the COVID issues, and the same is not exactly in the same trend for services. Next one, please. That's why the communication, the single market at 30, identified a number of areas of priority for the future of the single market, obviously continuing to reduce barriers, first of all in services, but also in capital markets, energy markets, and digital and data markets. This focus of services is to be done in quite a pragmatic way, and that's why some sectors have been identified as a priority, because there is a lot of potential, and also because there are still quite a lot of obstacles, and those who were here for the chat with Stefano Soro heard about what is being done for renewable energy that we all love, but try to get a permit to do something about it. And also it's quite in the conundrum of the energy market rules that are now, by the way, being discussed and revised. But that's not all. It's all also about enforcement. As I said, we had a lot of directives, still a lot of directives coming. They have to be transposed. They are not always transposed in time. They are not always transposed as they should be transposed, and that's what we call conformity. Conformity deficit is when a directive is transposed, but not in a correct way. And if a directive is not transposed in the spirit of, let's say, the agreed proposal between the three institutions, what happens is that you create obstacles, because basically the laws end up being different between member states. So there is not much progress from the previous situation, which was different laws, but with the articles of the treaty. Also, enforcement is not only a legal job, it's about people in the member states, people in the Commission, people in the chambers of commerce, people in businesses, but also citizens checking that their rights of free movement are actually there, and then that can be really enforced and benefit can be drawn from them. So we are experimenting a number of new ways of working, and one is the SMET, and I should have put there Single Market Enforcement Task Force. This is quite a high-level forum at administrative level where member states come together, decide on some very practical issues, for example, related to posting of workers, and decide together to solve them. There are the Solve It centers where citizens can just complain about something not working, and they are quite successful for issues like, for example, social security coordination, because you may remember this number of how many citizens from other EU states, other member states work in another member state. That is possible if their rights, in particular social security, are respected. Now in the communication, we have some benchmarks and targets on how to speed up the regulatory part, but also to speed up this resolution mechanism. Also, the idea is to have prevention, not to get to the point people and businesses have to complain or make do, which is the majority of cases, just people make do. They have a problem with their pension, they have a problem with the bills of the hospital, they have a problem with sending their goods abroad or benefiting for services, and they make do. That's not how the single market should be. It's not the spirit of the single market. The single market is about seamless movement. It's about my children getting surprised the first time they have to show their passport somewhere. Well, since COVID, you have to show your passport everywhere. So that's how it should be. So prevention is important. And there again, we would like to work on single notification entry points for member states so that they just tell us and other member states what they are doing in an easy way, and what we call single market offices in member states. Let's say friendship with single market is very different between member states and EEA countries. Some have large departments dealing with it. In some, it's very easy to get in touch with some, and for others is more complicated. The idea is also to do laws and regulations in a way that is growth enhancing. And that leads me then to the other communication, because as I said, not only the single market will never be complete, but also it has to serve its purpose, which is a purpose of integration, a purpose of sharing values, and a purpose of delivering in sustainable growth and jobs. So we can go to the next slide. And this is the second communication on long-term competitiveness. Basically, it identified, from a very economic point of view, 9 drivers for long-term competitiveness, i.e. beyond 2030. So the first, obviously, is a functioning single market, because that's the whole idea, one of scale, access to nearly 500 million consumers, but also a space of shared values and a safe space. And that's why, for example, consumer protection, respect of climate laws, this is very, very important, so that people can move freely and safely and seamlessly without even thinking about it. But then again, that's not enough, because for businesses to thrive, it's important to have access to private capital, to public investment in infrastructure. And then I come to a subject that is obviously dear to you, to research and innovation, because the single market, the European economy, is continually in motion. And all the objectives we have set for ourselves, which are, if I put it very briefly, green transition, digital transition, and let's say now resilience, or you can call it strategic autonomy, I'd rather call it resilience, cannot be achieved only by political will, it's important, or by our economic structures of today. They're obviously quite important, and we are quite an area of economic excellence, but they really need research and innovation. There is quite consensus, and I guess you discussed that with Stefano, that we will never get to the green objectives with the technologies of today. That we will not get to the society we aim for without fair digitalization. And now all the debate on the artificial intelligence is quite everywhere. But again, I think it makes the bridge between digitalization and fairness, and I would say values, the values we want. And this expression, trustworthy AI, is something that began in Europe and that we hope to export. This, again, we need political will, we need economic might, and that's why we can export a number of values, and this is called, among the economists, the Brussels effect. But we need to continue to be in the run and continue to innovate in all these areas. Then we have energy. Obviously, all of this is possible only if we have clean, affordable, and plentiful energy. In a way, it could even be merged with research and innovation, because that is linked, and the conditions to have that is obviously, again, political will, regulatory, but also new ways to do things, and that links to circularity, because one way of using less raw materials is just to reuse them endlessly. And this, again, is very much linked to innovate in a number of areas. And also, in particular, my colleagues always say to me, the most important is innovation in behavior of companies, of citizens, of also public authorities. And the effect of the war has been quite impressive, because the war in Ukraine, we did a lot to convince and allow persons and businesses to use less energy. But the biggest gains were linked just to behaviors, and in particular behaviors of companies, who were incredibly, how do I say that, innovative in their thinking and original for using less energy. And they did it not only for economic reasons, because there is a part of corporate responsibility there, and they did it even when, and most of them do not have the choice of the source of energy, because there is not a free choice there. The market doesn't function. You have to take the energy from wherever you take it, and the choice is not really there, but it's quite impressive. Obviously, digitalization, we talked about that, and this cannot, all of this cannot be done without educations and skills. So there is the issue of really the long-term issue of having education systems that allow to feed in tertiary educations what it's needed, and what's it needed for things we don't know yet. And this is quite something, but also skills that continue to change, and we cannot always wait just to train other people. And Stefan, I guess, spoke about that, about Skills Academy, because those of you who are trying to put a heat pump in your house know that it's all very great, but first of all, you have to find the heat pump, and then to have to find the person that puts the heat pump. And this is becoming really something quite complicated right now. And then last but not least, trade and open strategic autonomy, because the single market is not alone in the world. And we have to deal with that, what happens outside, which is not always very simple, and obviously comes always with surprises. And the COVID crisis, the energy crisis, and the Ukrainian crisis have shown in quite a graphic way that it's not good to have only one plan. And this should, it's quite obvious, like you should not have only one source of energy, but let's say we felt it quite strongly. We also kind of noticed that the just-in-time is perhaps not great, because if there is any problem in supply chains, that's totally over. we also saw things like, the Suez Canal can be blocked for 3 weeks. And these things that now seem obvious before the COVID crisis were just really, really, really in the back of our mind, and that needs rethinking and an innovative rethinking also at policy level, which is what a lot of colleagues are doing right now. We can go to the next. There is then an horizontal objective in the communication, which is what I also explained before for the single market, is that regulations must be growth enhancing. The big, let's say, title in the papers was the promise of President von der Leyen to diminish by 20% the reporting burdens for companies, and in particular for SMEs. But behind this concept, there are a number of things that are important, and the one that is particularly important for the innovation community is the use of regulatory sandboxes and test beds, sunset and review clauses. And this way of approaching regulation should allow for early pickup of innovation, for testing of innovation, also from a regulatory point of view, and also with sunset and review clauses for the, I wouldn't say seamless, but let's say easier integration of new technologies for the objectives, economic objectives. If we can go to the next, in the communication, there are a number of key performance indicators. Depending on where you work from, you will recognize them, or you are basically dealing with it on your day-to-day. There are also some targets for there are 1 or 2 KPIs for each of the drivers. Obviously, they don't show the whole picture, but the idea is to have really, let's say, a graphic, and we can go to the next vision of what we're talking about. So a lot of you are very much familiar with this one, R&D intensity, and this famous target of the 3% of GDP between private and public investment in research and innovation. Well, we're not there. Some countries are there, which is not the case for all the KPIs. So quite a lot to do, because I think there is quite a consensus that it's very important to invest in research and innovation, but then when it comes to numbers, it's not so much. And now with the war in Ukraine and quite a push for increasing defense budgets, there is also quite some worry about that. But I recently read an analysis saying that the usual paradigm that was the one of the wars, the big wars of the last century and the race to space, was that research, strategic research was done in the defense sector and then trickled down to, let's say, the civil economy. Right now, we have exactly the opposite. So basically, defense is taking up research and innovation from the civil economy. So politicians will have really to look carefully at the choices they do, so that we get to this target of 3%. We can have the next. Another example I took is the one of circularity. I took this one because that is well also very much linked to innovation. Innovation not only in technologies, but as I said before, in social sciences, in behavior, and you really see that there is very, very different picture among the member states, with this clear outlier of the Netherlands. We can go to the next. Thank you. Yeah, you don't have a slide because what I'm saying is related to what will be discussed at the European Council. So how will this work in practice? The idea is to have an annual policy cycle where every year in January, and I come to the dates, these things are discussed, most probably on the basis of a communication of the Commission, but will monitor the progresses or not. Hopefully the progress is made on the single market and on the different drivers, looking at the KPIs, but not only. The idea is to have a picture for the competitiveness councils, perhaps to be decided, to assess, have conclusions, and then a high-level political discussion at the European Council of Spring, which is usually end of March. And then you'll say, why now June? Yes, because the communications were a bit delayed, but the idea is that this first assessment would come next January if we get the green flag of the council next week, which we expect, we, meaning the European Commission, but also the member states, we expect to have. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Julia. I think it was extremely interesting also for, as you correctly said, for our dear sector, which is research and innovation. And while you were presenting, I was reflecting on the fact that there are so many interrelated things into the picture that you gave about the single market competitiveness post 2030 of Europe related to research and innovation, but also you mentioned energy, you mentioned digitalization, you mentioned open strategic autonomy that we had the possibility to discuss a couple of weeks ago in another event. The first reaction that I would like to provoke you in my role of coordinator of, of moderator of this session, inviting the people meanwhile to indicate their willingness to intervene by writing your name in the Q&A section of the Zoom link. You have the Q&A box under the screen with written Q&A, so easy to find. And please, let's challenge Julia as much as possible to exploit her knowledge. So my question at the moment is, okay, the single market is fixing some targets. One of them related to the GDP is also linked to the strategic, to the European research area. That is the long-term wish that the Commission has since the Lisbon strategy. So we are talking about 2010. But given the acceleration that we are living today, and given the fact that I suspect that also from the political point of view, the perception about research and innovation is changing, and the need for research and innovation is changing. And given the fact that soon we are starting discussing about FP10 and its related budget, do you think that this time there will be less fight, for example, in increasing investment in research and innovation? I know it's a very high-level political question, and probably you don't have a clear answer, but from the inner side of the Commission, what is your feelings? Of course, not an official statement, but maybe the feelings that you have in terms of the future debate that is going to happen about the future budget for industry, for innovation, for the regulation part, and also for research and innovation.
So I can say we will have, all of us, quite a clear feeling on it when the current review of the midterm review of the multi-annual financial framework. So right now, the Commission has prepared some proposals for the Council for the multi-annual review, and there we'll see exactly, because a number of requests will be done, and I would totally imagine also for the current Horizon.
But also Erasmus is important for skills, if you want.
But the current Horizon, and there on this debate, I think we will have a clear indication. So this is one thing. So we will have an early feeling of that. The second, I said it is about how this increasing in defense budget debate will lead, because of this changed link with civil research. you know, so it's not like I will put, we cannot do the 20th century thing again, but let's see how the politicians read that, and now where will they cut? Because that's the thing, where will they cut? That's a debate that will be a lot on the member states, because the target, you know, Horizon is great, we all love it, but it's a tiny drop in the whole research thing. Then a third thing, and it's something that we discussed at this other event, but someone said that anyway, the research priorities are defined at university level. No, and I answered, I don't think so. Because you have fashion, you have political debate, and you have some influence of politics, but in a way or another goes into the university. And you have even influence of businesses, because businesses pay for research, they pay for the library. And I gave this example of how in Switzerland, obviously the watch industry pushed a lot for research in micro techniques and micro robotics, and now comes in handy for drones. Rolex never wanted to push drones, perhaps they wanted, but I wouldn't imagine. I'm saying Rolex, I could have said, yeah, but they ended up. So it's not true. There is, let's say, even a bottom up of influence on what the economy wants, and a top-down influence of what a government wants. A government wants diversification of the economy out from oil, and obviously in one way or another, research institutions will answer. I think this will become more strong. At the level of the European Union, the push for the climate targets and the digital targets obviously had an influence. Sometimes direct, because that's how you program Horizon, obviously, and even though Horizon is small, it has a leverage effect. Then there is the effet d'annonce, you say in French, you know, this becomes fashionable, so, you know, oh, obviously I want to do this. And there you have the AI debate of right now, that everybody's in a frenzy because there are economic opportunities, but also because it's out there. So there is this, let's say, bottom-up effect. And I would imagine we will go to a more top-down effect. It could happen. We moved in Horizon from a lot of, let's say, like dictated priorities to bottom-up, and that was great. Let's see what happens afterwards, and this will have an effect also on budget decisions. So a lot to be watching there, and also to be watching in ourselves, because now we are all about AI. Eh? Even like passively, we are all about AI.
Of course, this is the fashion thing. And meanwhile, we authorize Catherine Angel-Hansen to intervene. So Catherine, be ready to open your microphone and camera. I think you touched upon a very interesting set of points for reflection, also for the people which are somehow embedded in the debate that I suspect are also following. So the fact that we basically have to take into consideration all the aspects and not just focus on R&I. And it is a real balance that we have to tackle for the future if we want also to advocate for more money for research. Catherine, I think you are online now. Here you are. Nice to see you. Can you introduce yourself, Catherine?
Thank you so much, Massimo, and Julie, thank you for a fantastically good intervention, as always. My name is Catherine Angel-Hansen. I am Norwegian. I am working at the moment in the Partnership on Sustainable Blue Economy under Horizon 2020. It's a co-programmed partnership, co-funded, between the Commission and the European Union, which is led by Italy and co-led by Norway, and I'm the chair of the partnership. I had a few questions relating to your intervention, Julia, which I think is very spot on, because we do know that if we want to innovate in the market, one of the big challenges for Europe to compete with continents like the US and China is precisely the singleness of the market. And at the same time, there are the challenges very clearly in Europe that it's autonomous regions where the competence to a very large degree, but for common fisheries policy and agriculture and a few others, is the competence of the member states and always often also dispatched at a regional level. So I think the issue of addressing with innovation-friendly approach to regulation is very, very timely and very important. But I'd like to highlight two dimensions in it. One, it is now seen from the ocean's perspective. For instance, if you go to a country like France, they'll probably have to harmonize national sectoral regulations across 9 ministries to be able to move in 2025 on reaching a target, which is going to be extremely difficult for them and all of us and the other member states in moving towards renewable energies. So for instance, wind in the ocean. So you need to harmonize agriculture, fisheries, ports, authorities, maritime, yeah, I could go on. So there's clearly things to learn from each other across member states and associate countries, needless to say. But at the same time, I would assume it's also important to balance this to avoid that you develop unfavorable competition across the member states. So how to sort of balance that? So early birds coming out, maybe being less favorable on the energy side than another country who's finding another solution to it. And this is a single market issue. That's one thing. And the other thing I would like to ask you about is we all the time speak about digital skills. But we know that young people work digital. The most popular company for people with digital skills today to work is Google. We all know that. So there is also something to balance here on attractiveness. So taking a fishing vessel, for instance, who wants to digitalize but is not allowed to, because of the common fishery policy, increase volume on board. So they have to be sleeping like 6 persons in the cabin under very primitive conditions. You need to also, if you want to accompany and move towards a more digitalized society, you also need to make sure that the framework conditions for the employees are nice. So it's quite complex. You need to look at all of these areas at the same time. And that's why I'd like to say also that I'd like to compliment the Commission, because you're working on an impact orientation where you take all of these things into account. But how do you really do this? I mean, how are you working on this? Because it's a huge mission in itself, which you've embarked upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Challenging as always. Giulia.
No, thank you very much. So, yes, the single market is a challenge because a number of these things can have an impact, a negative impact on the single market. So what you said is true, and it has been out there quite strongly on the debate on state aids. So now, you know, state aids are being used by a number of countries. One, because they can. Two, because it's in their culture. It's not only about having the money. There are a number of member states that have good finances, but it's not their way of operating, you know, like the blanket state aid, you know, Scandinavian countries, for example. When you have those who don't have the money, like my country, the country we know best, they perhaps would like to do it, but they don't have the money, and they still do. So the numbers that were issued some months ago by Executive Vice President Vestager showed that basically, I think it was 80% of the state aid up to that point with the flexibility rules issued by DG Competitions were in 4 member states, something like that. And this is an issue because that breaks the single market eventually, not immediately, but eventually that breaks the single market. And that could be extended also to innovation funding. And these are not state aids because, well, they are, but they are obviously exempted. But obviously, if some member states, they can decide they go full forward on whatever hydrogen, then you have an effect on what will happen in the single market for hydrogen, and you get to these discrepancies. So yes, this is a worry. This is a worry for a number of member states, for the Commission, for a number of experts outside are talking about that. And in the research and innovation community, well, when I worked with Commissioner Moedas, this was quite obvious, you know, the net beneficiaries of Horizon are exactly not the net beneficiaries in general of structural funds. And it's okay, but you have to have safeguards, and you have to be able, but this strength of research and innovation in rich and friendly member states for research and innovation trickle down to the whole single market. So you're totally right, this has to be watched. In research, a number of things have been done. For example, you know that rules for partnerships that allow also this trickling down. You have a lot also the ERA initiatives, the opening of research infrastructures that helps the trickle down. And we have evidence that you have centers of excellence coming up in some countries. Then you have the regional aspect. And well, the obvious case is the Czech Republic, you know. Things in research and innovation in Prague go extremely well. So there was really a catch-up of the Czech Republic, and in Prague is up there, but that's not the same everywhere. And then you can say, okay, the biggest universities are in Prague, that's okay. But it's more complex than that. And this is something that has to be watched. And it has to be watched, and there are things that have been done outside of research and innovation. The IPSEs, important projects of common thanks. IPSEs is so, and in Italian it's even worse, it's just terrible. These do not come with money, they come with competition rules. And the idea is basically to have cross-border state aid. And IPSEs are open to everybody. And this idea, in a way, that's my saying, cross-border state aid. I think my colleagues in DG Competition would kill me, but that's a bit the idea, is to create rules and communities so that things can be done in a way that one is cross-border and two trickles down. In a way, NATO could have a similar effect, because this push for defense increase will, in a way, be done, and NATO rules are not ours, but will be done in a way that is coordinated. So we really have to watch at all levels that the big changes that are coming over are coordinated in spending and in not spending. Because, and that's why the review of the fiscal rules is very important. What will count for the rules on debt and well, stock and flow, let's say, and what can be excluded, linked to digital, etc., and green are also very important, so that you do not break the single market. And then you said about this thing of the digital skills. Yeah, this is key. And again, there is this thing of fashion. You know, Google is fashionable. And I remember an old speech of Barack Obama, older times, where he said that it was really a pity, but the best minds of the United States were going to work in the finance sector, which is, by the way, an important sector. But as it was at the time, that was near the crisis of 2008. So basically, the brightest people created the worst economic crisis of the world. Because before the crisis, this industry just attracted everybody. And with all due respect to the banks and to Google, this fact that one industry, which is not the one that allows us to eat and to drink, or at least marginally, is attracting the best minds, is a problem. And is a problem for universities, etc. But because I have two children in universities, and my son, who is doing physics now, because we pushed, said, I want to do IT. And I said, why? Just do something else. IT is everywhere, because IT is everywhere in universities. And what the tertiary education community did for mainstreaming the digital is an example for us all. And in the digital decade, we have quite ambitious objectives to get there, even as you said, in the boat of 6 persons. And this is something we are doing in quite a bottom-up collaborative way with what we call the transition pathways. So we look at the economic ecosystems and we discuss how will you get there for the digital and green objectives. It's quite laborious, but there have been quite some progress. Obviously, we're not like in tertiary education, but yes, it can be done. And people, in a way, they are ready, yeah? But the mindset is important. And that goes back to something I should have said before, but there is one interesting thing in the debate on AI. The debate of AI is a lot about social sciences and behavior. And I really hope we all collectively will push for this issue of innovation in social sciences, how you get a person in a fishing boat of 6 to do this jump. The person did it at home, he's using a GSM, has got Wi-Fi and everything, but how do you translate that so that you don't have this Google thing there, but you have Google as a service for all of us. But we need your example in universities because you actually did it. I was now, you study psychology and you are always doing algorithms so that we get to trickle down. But still, it's a fight, the Barack Obama fight, so that great minds, they go everywhere.
So we need to put great minds also on boats.
Yes, yes. But by the way, possibly, for those who know boats, we will get to an agreement to this thing of having the cameras on the boats. Catherine should know this thing. Yeah, looks like the Swedes will do the miracle. Let's cross fingers. One last thing, which I don't remember, will come back. When it comes back, I'll say it.
I see Catherine smiling, so probably she's satisfied about you want a reaction, Catherine? You can.
Yeah, just to say thank you for this thorough response. I'm very happy with what you said, and I really think the world has something to learn from the approach you're taking, where you're looking at where you want to go, and then saying, as you say, it's laborious, but you look at what are the bottlenecks in order to get there and how do we solve them. This approach is something we need to do when we're dealing with complex issues, because we have to cross the sectors, the ministerial sectors, the way we're working. You do it inter-service, you do it in the Commission by working inter-service, you do it by bringing in labor organizations, trade organizations, industry organizations, and you are very attentive to what are the major bottlenecks, what are you facing. I'm very impressed by it. And thank you for explaining that there is actually a very clear ambition and a methodology behind. So much appreciated. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you also for intervening. We still have time for an extra question. I see today our attendees are a bit shy, probably is the before summer. Feel free to write your name in case you want to intervene. While we are waiting for maybe another question from our audience, I would like also to open another side of the presentation you made, which is the one related on open strategic autonomy. The fact that basically, I know now the Commission is going also to issue this foresight, the foresight report that is based on open strategic autonomy. Is basically probably contributing in defining the vision on where Europe has to invest in the future. But I have a man of the street question in this case, which is based on the fact that I'm thinking if the ambition is, as always, you eat more with your eyes than you are capable to do with your stomach. Meaning that Open strategic autonomy means that we want Europe to be autonomous. But I'm wondering, do we have the capability to be fully autonomous, or we should just call it open partial strategic autonomy? Because basically I suspect that we will be always interlinked to someone. Previously to the Ukrainian war, it was the Russian petrol and gas. Now the risk is to go under a strategic dependence from materials from China. I mean, this is very well known. And of course, we need to implement this to reduce this dependence, but I don't think we have the capability and the strength to be completely autonomous and self-sufficient.
So on this one, this is not even a debate. We know that for most things we are not self-sufficient. For the clean air, we are not self-sufficient. So I always say to my parents in Italy how the beaches of the Belgian coast are clean. You know, you never get this oil on your feet. There is never a plastic, etc. You know, and that was collective work. On the North Sea being, in spite of being an industrial sea, being cleaned, and that is also a work with boats that come from over the world, and there you see that this interconnection. But interconnection is everywhere, and I always mention this study of the World Bank that goes to show that nobody in the world can do a GSM, a mobile phone alone. Nobody, not even the Chinese, because we have this idea the Chinese, they can do everything. No, they can't. If they could, then perhaps we would be in trouble. But the fact that we are interdependent does not lead for us to be safe. And the Russian aggression to Ukraine showed it. Because yes, we are quite dependent on our technologies, our consumer goods, etc. But still this happened. So open strategic autonomy, which is initially a defense and security, strategic autonomy without the open defense and security term, is about being resilient. It's not so much about closing the doors, and we don't want, it's not our way, and it would not be something beneficial, but it is the ability of being able to withstand shocks. And companies do that every day. You know, they diversify, they have plan Bs, plan Cs, they recycle, they lobby authorities, they do a number of things to be able to withstand shocks. And in a way, and I said it in my presentation, we saw it, well, we knew probably before, but we saw it during the crisis. We cannot, in case of crisis, depend on anyone, not even the United States. So everybody, you know, in the FT, they were saying the C word, you know, China. But it's important to have relationships with third countries, but also inside, and with Norway, for example, continuous dialogue and working together in order to be able to better withstand shocks, but also to have plan A's, B's, and C's, and to be constantly in the lookout for more resilient economy and for a better, more sustainable economy. So the fact of the climate targets is not only about future generations, and in a way should be about future generations, but it's also about being more resilient. It's not that nobody knew we were over-reliant on the Russian gas, but it was good, it was cheap, it was plentiful, and now perhaps we have to be looking at, let's say, a wider after. But openness is in the European DNA. It has been since, I don't know, the Roman Empire, and it's a part of who we are. But, you know, openness with a reason, and not have only one criterion, which is price. Because, and yeah, I read this fantastic article about Norway, but let's say, I don't know, like 90% of the cars that are sold now are electric. But doesn't come cheap to people. Eh? Yeah, I see. That's what Norwegian say. And obviously there is the tax aspect. You know, you tax more the fuel-based cars that become awfully expensive. And so people are more open to buying electric cars. But with the fiscal incentive comes also behavior. And with the behavior come different dependencies and different ways of buying and moving, etc. And this is open strategic autonomy, because Norway is not producing all these cars, not at all. But there was a choice, a clear choice from an oil-producing country that then had an effect on behaviors, on research and innovation, on also policy, because I guess you must have plentiful of chargers because it's a very big, geographically big country, and that's how it goes. And that's the idea of the open strategic autonomy, to have some clear choices, to know what we want, but also to bear the burden of what we want, because I would imagine the charging is not as easy as the fuel station in Norway as well.
Also, because you mentioned another thing, but I'm going to close the fact that today we don't have the capacity to reach the energy need targets, and we need, of course, to work on new technologies and investments in this sector. Given that we are reaching the end of today's appointment, I would like to thank you very much, Julia, for her very nice intervention and deserving her a virtual applause. This is the last edition of 1 Hour with Europe before the summer break. So we, of course, wish you all a very nice summer, and we will come back in September with a new guest and with a new topic to discuss, deepen our understanding and challenge our friends from the European Commission. Given that, have a very fantastic summer and see you in September.